Welcome to week 6 of Explore the Bible. Today we continue in really our last week in 1 Thessalonians. We're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. I guess we have one more week in 1 Thessalonians coming up after Easter. But this is a great passage, one that's probably familiar to many of you, and one that we hang a lot of hope on, one that we rely on for much. And before we look at that, I want to be sure that you subscribe to our channel. Be sure to comment, like, share it with others. Let us know how God's using it in your life. We appreciate that when you do it. All right, let's look. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, concerning those who are asleep, so that you will not grieve like the rest who have no hope. All right, so Paul has been writing to them about what's going to happen, and there's some concern. I mean, he's taught them about the return of Christ, but there's concern about, okay, but Christ hasn't come yet, and now some of our brothers and sisters in the faith, some of our friends in the church, have passed away. And what happens to them? What's going to go with them? Are they out? Do they need to be alive when Christ returns? What's going to happen? So he says, I don't want you to be uninformed about what's going to happen. And you have to think, Paul didn't have a lot of time in Thessaloniki, and so he taught them all that he could, the basics of all that he could, but obviously there were things he just couldn't cover, and so they've got questions, and so he's going to let them know, okay, here's what's going to happen. But I love this part where he says, I don't want you to grieve like people who have no hope. Those who don't know Christ, those who don't have hope for life eternal, those who, and it's hard to imagine, if you're a believer, it becomes hard to imagine, maybe it's hard to remember the feelings of what you experience if you don't know Christ and you don't think about that, and someone near you passes away, someone what do you do with that? How do you process that? And the sense of eternal loss that they feel, the sense of, well, that's the end, and I'll never see them again, and there is no hope for them beyond the grave, and all of that becomes a grief that is overwhelming, maybe. And it says you shouldn't grieve like people who don't know what's going to happen next. You shouldn't grieve like people who don't know, especially if you've lost one who is a believer. Don't grieve like those who don't know that there's hope for this person after the grave. So he says, for if we believe, and if, this is an if sense, since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, in the same way, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Okay, so this if, again, is a sense, and that's a Greek thing, okay, that sometimes the if can be if we do, and of course we do, basically what it means. So we might, in English, we would just say since. Okay, if we believe, and of course we do believe that Jesus died and rose again. So all of this is based on the resurrection next week. Okay, you can't talk about the resurrection until next week because that's Easter. We talk about, as believers, every Sunday is a celebration of the resurrection. So it's okay, you can talk about it now. We believe that Jesus died and rose again in that same way, through Jesus, through the work of Jesus, through faith in Jesus, through the accomplishment of Jesus' resurrection, death, burial, and resurrection. God will bring with him, that is with Jesus, those who have fallen asleep. He will bring they'll come with Jesus. There's going to be this holy reunion that's going to take place. So how's that going to happen? Well, let's describe it. For we say this to you by a word from the Lord. So Paul says, God's talked to me about this. I've gotten a word from God about this. Now, listen, Paul can say that. I can't say that, okay? I can't say God told me something about theology. I can't do that. Paul can say that, okay? All I get is going to come out of his word. He says, we who are still alive at the Lord's coming will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep. We're not going to beat them out of the grave. He says, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the archangel's voice, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Now, we're not talking here about the second coming. We're not talking about, the order of events that are going to occur. That's a study for other books, right? But here he's talking about what's going to happen when Christ returns, what's going to happen for those who have already passed away, and then for those who are still alive. And he's saying that, when Christ comes, when you hear the archangel's voice, when the trumpet sounds, when the Lord returns, and listen, everybody will know when the Lord returns, the dead in Christ will come up first. Well, even if you think that maybe you're not going to see it, when you start seeing dead people coming up out of graves and ascending, going up into heaven, you're gonna know something's up, right? The dead in Christ will rise first. The dead in Christ, this is those who are believers, those who have died as followers of Christ. Listen, there's no decision to be made after that. You've got to make your decision before you die. They will rise first. And then he says, we who are still alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. Okay, Paul says, we who are still alive. Paul, he thought the Lord could return at any moment. He certainly believed the Lord could return again while he was still alive, right? He puts himself in this group of we. He doesn't say those who are still alive. He says we who are still alive. The ones who are left, we're still here, and we're left because they've risen. He says, then we get caught up with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This holy reunion takes place in the air where we go and we are with the Lord. And from that point on till forever, from that point until forever, so we will always be with the Lord. Here is your hope. This is why we don't grieve like those who have no hope, because we know that one day those who have already passed, who knew the Lord, they will rise up to meet him, and we will join them meeting the Lord in the air, and we, from that point on, will always be with the Lord. So we don't grieve like people who don't have hope. We don't grieve like people who think it all ended when they put you in the ground. We don't grieve like people who believe that there is nothing, there is no eternity, there is no time to be again. And I want you to know that the Lord's promise to us is that the moment you pass from this earth, you go to be with the Lord. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, but this bodily resurrection that takes place, and for some who've been, a bodily reconstitution that takes place, right? Where we go to meet the Lord and we are with them, but we're with the Lord. Then that's as much as we say, I want to be with my loved ones, my grandparents and my great-grandparents and family and friends that have passed, being with the Lord is the prize here, right? So, he says, therefore, encourage one another with these words. It goes back to this, right? Don't grieve like those who have no hope. We encourage one another with these words. We help them get through difficulties. We help them get through the pain of loss. And I want to point something else out to you here. He doesn't say we don't grieve. He just says we don't grieve like the rest. He's not saying that it doesn't hurt to be apart. He's not saying that it doesn't hurt to lose time here on this earth with someone. But he does say our grief is not like everybody else's grief, who thinks there's nothing to be had, who thinks there's no place to go. Okay? Now, I hope that helps as you study. I've got a couple of questions for you to think about, maybe use it in your class. God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Next week, the resurrection is a combined study between Explore the Bible and Bible Studies for Life. So we're just going to have one video up next week on the resurrection, the Matthew passage. So looking forward to that. We'll see you then.